Well, hello there, Steve. How you doing?
Good evening.
All right, folks. So we're gonna
I
dive
don't
right
hear
into
anything.
uh oh, Steve having a technical issue because it was working before we started.
Let's see.
Okay,
Okay.
well, can you hear now?
Yeah, my headset just stopped working. Let me pull around. Okay, try it again.
All right, well, we're gonna
It's
okay. Boomer moment over there. Um,
yeah.
so tonight, I'm actually going to lead a little bit of a discussion on. Well, the idea started as a discussion on intelligence, but really it's a discussion about thinking more and feeling less because um, we live in a society that is trying to drive us to feel everything and not think at all. And frankly, we need to be asking ourselves, why is it so important to them that we not think? And I mean, as usual, I have an entire window full of browser tabs to go through, some things to look at. Uh, we're gonna it's gonna be another pretty nerdy episode tonight. So yeah, Steve, do you have anything you want to say about thinking and intelligence, and before we get going?
No, it'll come out. I mean, there's I just know from myself and observing others that when you're intensely feeling something or in your emotions, your higher order brain functions, which means thinking, is out the window.
Yeah. So I mean, what is intelligence, just in general? Here, I'm going to add this. We typically and define it as humans, and this is how psychologists define it. They use something called intelligence quotient, or IQ, and it's a set of standardized tests. Now they get down into there's actually a bunch of different tests, and they're all trying to say, oh well, we have this way or that way of figuring out what IQ is, but they're all relatively similar. They all use relatively similar sort of structures. So the way that IQ is set up is it's a range from 0 to 200, and the mean, which just means average, is 100, and a standard deviation is 15. So if if you have an IQ of 115, you're one standard deviation above normal. If you have an IQ of 130, you're two standard deviations, and they don't have the graph up here, but it's a bell curve. So IQ is a measurement system. It is a method of measuring how intelligent somebody is. And to all of the blank slate equalists out there, get bent. There are such thing as people who are smarter than you. And in fact, for most people, most people are at 100. The,
Right. And when you get, I forget the bell curve, but when you get up to like 145, three standard deviations, that's like 1.5% of the people or something like that.
145 is half a percent.
Half a percent.
Yeah,
Okay. So that would mean if your IQ is 130,
about 2%.
you're 2%.
Yeah.
Okay. So yeah, I mean, it gets rare. The higher you get in IQ, it gets rare to find other people of the similar IQ.
As I was prepping for this and reading about this, one of the things I learned is that above 130, normal IQ tests don't work very well. So what they do is they test you, and if you score 130 above, they give you a different test that's designed specifically for what they call
Hmm.
gifted. It's a gifted test. So uh, they are these tests. They're not perfect, and I think what a lot of people get caught up on is the fact that because we're measuring human variability and people are different, that these tests don't perfectly measure your IQ. I mean, there's like 15 different tests and they're all trying to get the right measurement. People tend to say, "Oh, well, because you can't measure it perfectly, it's wrong." No, no, like the variation between these tests would swing your IQ 2, maybe 3 points in a given direction. Not enough difference to make a difference. So, you have to be able to think about intelligence in terms of, you know, this is a real measurable thing, and this concept of measurability is going to come up later because we're also going to talk about emotional intelligence, and there's some problems there. Uh, Now, IQ, your IQ has both genetic and environmental factors associated with it. Now, when we say environmental, particularly in the US, we wrongly tend to think that that means that it's your school, that it's your social environment, that it's the people around you who make you smarter. That is incorrect. The number one factor in determining in your environmental factor in IQ is nutrition and the nutrition of your mother during gestation and even up through breastfeeding, probably, if I understand how that system works. So now, of course, if you are part of a first world country like the United States, you're going to have access to modern medical care that will also improve your chances. It'll improve your and that can improve your IQ. But thing once your IQ is solidified within like the first 6 months to a year. So this idea that you're going to go to school and you're going to get smarter is just wrong because I'm going to say this, and I've heard other people say it. IQ does not determine how much you know or how good you are at taking in and sort of, yeah, how much you know does not determine what your IQ is. Your IQ determines how much and how fast you can take in. Well, not so much how much, but how fast you take it in. Think of intelligence as the speed at which you arrive at the answer. Okay. A person with an IQ of 145 is going to arrive at the correct answer twice as fast as a person with a 130 IQ,
Yeah.
which is terrifying to think about. And so don't think of it as a you can just go and get the right answers from a school and that'll make you smarter. That's not how this works.
I, okay. I have a degree in mechanical engineering. So, and I made it through. Okay, that requires discipline, but you have to have pretty high intelligence to make it through the some of those STEM fields. Um, so, you know that it's not a guarantee of success.
It's
It's
not.
not, but it's interesting. And I've learned that okay, I look at things differently than other people. I can take some information and I form a concept, And then I can actually sometimes turn it around and look at it from different angles. And I can see implications, and then I can make a snap judgment. Nope, that's no good. Throw it away because I see some non-working element, and then move on to the next one. Well, I think some of that is my training, but there's an innate ability, and yeah, okay, I'm not the strongest guy, most fit guy out there, not the tallest, but I do happen to have a little bit higher intelligence. Doesn't make me better than anybody else. It just is.
Well, right. Just it, here's another mistake that often gets made. People often assume that because somebody is good looking, they must also be intelligent. And that's kind of what you're talking about here, Steve. You're not the strongest. You're not the best looking guy out there.
Oh,
I'm
thanks.
hey, I'm not either. So, and I'll never claim to be the strongest or the best looking guy out there. Now, here's an interesting observation on intelligence, though. The intelligent man says, I don't need to be the strongest in X, Y, and Z case because I have tools. And Steve's an engineer. He understands the concept of tools very well.
Sure.
uh, for example, we think that you think that strength matters. Okay, let's talk self-defense for a little bit. Strength matters right up until somebody pulls out a knife. Okay, that knife is an equalizer. Your strength doesn't matter as much if that person can cut you up, slice your muscles. Okay, but you still need to have some strength to be able to get in and roll around in the mud with the knife. Now we upgrade to long range hole punchers. Now all of a sudden, you can defend yourself from the ground. You can be on the ground getting kicked, draw, fire, and that I don't care how much muscle that person has, they're going down if you hit. And in fact, for physics reasons, having muscle is actually worse than having fat if you're getting shot at. It's a long story about fluid dynamics, but the reality is you're going to get wrecked.
Intelligence comes into play in a lot of different areas.
Yeah.
One of the basic ones is moving furniture. Because, I've had to move a big couch with my ex-wife. Well, okay, if it was two guys, we could just both pick it up and bring it in. Nope, she can't lift that.
Yep.
So it's me. Well, we still got to get the job done. So how do you do? Well, you kind of get it up there, you put some carpets down, you kind of pull it up the stairs, and then you tip it end over end, and you use leverage. It's basically tools. You got to get the job done. Well, you don't have to do it with brute strength.
Right. Exactly. There's the examples here run endlessly, but these smart. This is what I mean when I say the smarter you are, the faster you're going to get to the answer. See, Steve's going to come and he say, "Oh well, my wife doesn't have the upper body strength to do this, so I need a tool. What tool do I have access to that's going to work for me?" And he mentioned, like a piece of carpet or a rug or something, and you pull it up on the rug. That's a tool. It's a simple tool. It's what Archimedes. If you give me a lever, I'll move the world. Right?
Right.
That's a tool.
Yeah.
Okay, so intelligent people are tool users, and they're more likely to use the tools around them. Great. But is that all that intelligence is? We keep hearing about emotional intelligence, and I've heard there's as many as these 5 different intelligences, and I'm actually kind of sitting over here going, "What's wrong with people?" But so first off, I want to I want to start with just what is emotional intelligence in the modern psychological vernacular. And the theory of emotional intelligence, and it is a theory, I want to point that out, was introduced by two psychologists in the mid 1990s. Oh, okay. And it was further developed by another doctor. The concept is also known as emotional quotient, or EQ, and this is, you'll see a lot of people refer to EQ. It has gained wide acceptance amongst the general population. They don't say that here, but some psychologists argue that because EQ cannot be captured via psychometric testing, as can general intelligence, it lacks true explanatory power. Now, what do they mean by that? I can put an IQ test in front of somebody, pick a test, whatever test. The ASVAB is one that the most of you have probably dealt with if you've been in a public high school. The ASVAB, by the way, is a IQ test because by law, the United States Army cannot take anybody with an IQ lower than 82 because there are no jobs that they can teach somebody of an IQ that low in the military to do. So
Yeah, they're actually a bigger hindrance than a help. There
right.
is nothing of use they can do for the military. And if they were in there, they would actually detract from effectiveness just by their mere presence.
Yep.
That's what they determined. This was determined, I think, back in the pre-World War One or World War One days. They started researching and developing these rules.
Yeah, I don't remember exactly when it is. I think it was shortly before World War One. There was an explosion of psychology that happened in between the Civil War and those two time periods. And so there was a lot of study going on. A lot of the general intelligence stuff has its roots in sort of that mid 19th century era. A lot
They were
of it.
fascinated with mind things. Not all of them were scientific.
Yes.
Phrenology, remember that one?
Yes, I
Oh,
do.
that was measuring the bumps on your head to determine whether you had a criminal mind. Okay, well, that one was a little bit silly.
Well, and this is how science goes. It takes us a long time to develop a theory, even longer to test it, and even longer to prove that the tests are valid. And IQ's been around for about the actual term has been around since the first decade of the 18th or the 20th century. Sorry, 1909, I think, was when it was first sort of codified.
Yeah.
So, but I mean, the concepts that were put into it came around, 50 years of work prior to that, trying to get there. So, but you're talking about World War One. Yeah, that's about the time that they were doing this. So, here's an interesting thing: a person high in EQ is not impulsive or hasty in their actions. They think, they think
Wow.
before they do. So, what this is saying, without, they're desperately trying not to say it, is that somebody who thinks first has higher emotional intelligence than somebody who just acts on their emotions. Now, this is Psychology Today. This is a major psychology journal. There's the peer review stuff that comes out of here is actually pretty reasonable in a lot of cases. And this is their page on emotional intelligence. They're trying to describe this to you. And they just said that your intelligent people are going to have higher general IQ. And when you think about it, it makes sense. Somebody who is thinking faster than you is going to recognize what emotions you're putting out and interpret them and respond to them before you've finished putting it out.
Well, here's another thing. This is a personal observation or the way I have figured out how my brain works. It used to be, I was up in my head all the time, like a lot of engineers. Other people have emotions. I've not ever been highly emotional, and I couldn't understand their emotions. Um, Over time, studying, some psychological things and understanding what background or events caused them to feel or react how they did causes me to understand their emotions. Oh, now it kind of makes sense. I understand what they're feeling and why they're feeling it. So I think in my mind, a person can learn better emotional intelligence, but they cannot improve their IQ. Does that make any sense?
That makes a lot of sense. Oh, hey, Nick. Hi.
Okay.
We are just getting started on emotional intelligence here, and
Oh, did you see my text message on that?
I did. We're setting it up. We can knock it
Oh,
down
okay.
later, but we're setting it up right
Okay.
now
All
because
right.
this is from Psychology Today, and here's the sentence, if you can see that they use to describe. Um,
So it means somebody who uses their intelligence regarding emotion.
well, specifically, a person they are not impulsive or hasty in their actions. They think, keyword, they think before they do. An emotionally intelligent person ends up just being somebody with high IQ. They because a person with high IQ who is thinking clearly and rationally is not going to move hastily or impulsively. They're going to sit down and think about what they're going to do and say. And if we were going over this with Steve a bit earlier, uh, IQ does not mean you know more than the other person. IQ is not about your encyclopedic knowledge. IQ allows you to get to the answer faster than somebody else. It determines the speed at which you get to the answer.
Yeah, and memory.
Speed of
Mhm.
People have
comprehension.
better
Yeah.
memories
Yeah.
than others. If you have high IQ and a pretty good memory, you retain a lot of facts. And as you're thinking, you can bring in those
Yep.
facts and put them together, and you don't have to waste time looking something up. And you might not have it exactly right, but you can make assumptions and estimates. You're probably pretty good at estimating what the answer is. And you might not be 100% right, but 80, 90% of the time, you're probably going to be pretty close.
Right. So you get to the answer faster. Well, what does that mean for emotional intelligence? And this is where you kind of joined up is if somebody has a high IQ, we're not talking emotion EQ, which is their term for emotional intelligence.
Mhm.
You're going to see how that other person is reacting emotionally, and you're going to have access to your memories and past experiences with how what this emotional path that this person is going down can lead to. You're actually going to arrive at that answer before they do and be able to respond. You have the response already ready to go before they've even
Mhm.
finished reacting to what you said before. Okay. That's just intelligence as applied to emotional action. And this is why a large number of psychologists say that
Pattern
because
recognition, basically.
yeah, this is why they say that it lacks true explanatory power. Well, and that also EQ can't be captured on psychometric testing. So if you can't measure it, you can't use it to explain anything. Now, there's a further article in here that kind of reiterates this point. It may be useful to think of emotional intelligence as a combination of skills and traits and behaviors that can be developed over time. Well, if IQ is a mixture of genetics and your parents' access to good food and good medical care, that's not something that you are developing over time. Your IQ can be used to achieve these things,
So a lot of
but
very intelligent, high IQ people can also be socially retarded because uh, use that part of their brain around these parameters.
that's true. But the other thing that you might not notice is that a large number of high IQ people do very, very well interacting with people. Uh, we
True.
want
Some do, but some don't.
some don't, and we
Okay,
want.
so
Go
my
ahead.
question is, some high IQ people who don't do well with interpersonal skills, is there a correlation or a causation with their high intelligence? Or is it just two separate things? They happen to get high IQ and low ability to relate or understand others. Is it just two random things that came together and it's just more apparent in those people? Or does the high intelligence cause someone to be socially inept?
We don't have good data on this, in part because there's so few high IQ people out there to start with. You know, two standard deviations is 2% of the population or less, depending on exactly which test you use. Okay. So, you know, an IQ of 130, anywhere over 130, and you're talking about, you know, less than 2% of the population. Well, okay, that's not a lot of people to work with. But I'm reminded of there was this woman, and she had an IQ of like 180. And she was invited on one of the big talk shows back in the 90s. It might have been Oprah. Oh, it could have been somebody else, but I'll run with Oprah. And she was just the most pleasant, nicest person. And everyone who ever met her said, "Oh yeah, no, that's just who she is. She's super pleasant, super nice. Yeah, she can run rings around you with mathematics." She was some sort of physics, mathematics thing, and I cannot remember her name. But you know, it doesn't have to be. And I think that it's I think that specifically shows like uh, the Big Bang Theory actually kind of do a disservice to highly intelligent people by yeah, sure, 180 IQ isn't. There's only like one or two people on the planet who have IQs that high at any given time. But I think that shows like the Big Bang Theory have actually done a disservice to high IQ people by basically painting them all to be autistic nerds. You know,
Yeah,
go ahead.
I have a funny story.
Go. Good.
So, in chemistry in college, I've always been very good at taking tests. I know my stuff. And so, in chemistry class, I was a freshman. There was this kid who was in high school or something, and he came in to take the class. Just wicked smart. We nicknamed him Junior Einstein. Well, I was always one of the first people to get done with tests. And so we get in there in the test, and I knew the material pretty good. So I says, I am going to beat him done with the test today. So I'm just whipping through, and I'm not being as careful. I'm just whipping through that. By God, he still got done sooner than me. I was the second person to hand it in, but there's no way. There is no way I could compete with him. Yeah, Obviously, he had a much higher IQ than me. And the other funny thing was the professor found an excuse to give him a B. And he was so proud. I love this professor, by the way. He was so proud of that. And he says, yeah, probably the only B he's ever going to get in his college career. He thought the guy needed to be brought down to reality a little bit.
Yeah. It actually it does help him to be wrong. It is good to be wrong a little bit, just to be reminded that you're still human.
But you got to find humor in those things.
Oh yeah. But the interesting thing about this, as I was doing research for this, is the psychology community does not consider emotional intelligence to be intelligence. It says right here. But if it's furthermore, it's not to say that EI isn't important. And I would argue that being aware of other people's, particularly being aware of other people's emotional state, especially in this modern era, is extremely important. But if it's not a type of intelligence, then what is it?
Well, yeah, we said that prior to the show. It's a criticism of men. Because how many women tell their husbands, you just don't have emotional intelligence? He's got no idea what emotional intelligence is. In her mind, emotional intelligence is when she's emoting, he's not feeling what she wants him to feel.
Mm-hmm.
Therefore, he doesn't have emotional intelligence.
Oh, that reminds me,
comments
like
on that, Nick?
Well, like in my custody evaluation, I was criticizing for not being empathetic. I said, well, I probably prefer the word sympathy, but just because somebody feels something doesn't mean I have to feel that with them. They could be freaking wrong, right? And I need to sympathize with them. How about no? You're wrong.
Okay, Nick. You and I had the same experience. When a higher IQ person is in a custody evaluation with a social worker.
You're a dumbass.
Okay, well, yeah, but
Probably.
Okay, you have two different paths in life. I mean, social workers, yeah, they have a college degree. Doesn't really take a lot to get it. Now, if you're in philosophy or computer science or engineering or theology or there are there's probably two standard deviations of difference between your intelligence and the person evaluating you, and they're not going to like you. They're not going to understand you.
Well,
they're
going
to think
either.
there's something wrong with you, but they have the control.
Oh yeah, that's what I'm saying, man. Bad. Let's put the shackles on the man because he actually is intelligent and doesn't buy into bull.
Yeah, that happens.
Well,
oh yeah, but
I think the thing to understand here is that just because somebody is less intelligent than somebody else, so let's say, two standard deviations, that's 130. Let's say you're dealing with somebody of actual average IQ. That person is going to recognize that you are mentally beating them to the finish line everywhere they go. But they themselves cannot understand how you do that, why you do that. They recognize that you're doing it to them, and so how are they going to feel about that?
Resentful,
insulted, mad. He's He's just a pompous jackass. He thinks he's smarter than everyone. He doesn't know how to feel for people.
Right. They're afraid of you.
Yeah.
And one of the things that when
So
I
not only are you a bad man, you're a scary man. You're a scary bad man. That's really bad.
Sorry, can't think just because I can think of the logical consequences ahead of everybody else.
right, but this is why, and I've talked to a lot of people who've even IQs higher than mine. They've told me, "Oh yeah, I routinely play dumb."
Fun.
Well, because that is one of the mechanisms for getting along with people whose IQs are significantly lower than you. Like, if you're within 10 points, you can probably carry on a conversation. Like, I don't know what your guys' IQs are, and actually, you don't need to say them for the purpose of the stream because the stream isn't about us. But our IQs are probably pretty similar based on the conversations we've had. Whatever they are, they're probably pretty similar.
That's been my
Because
conclusion.
yeah, you could say somebody's logically wrong, but at some point the purpose is not to beat them up with logic. So, but if you have another purpose in mind besides just beating them with the immediate logic, you can try to look over certain things that they do and just encourage the fact that they're trying to think through something and doing something that they need to be doing. So there's
Well,
that
Yeah,
too.
and you
Oh,
have to learn to keep your mouth shut.
yeah.
When you have the answer and they're still struggling to get through it, don't give them the answer
Don't give them.
or jump to be waiting at the finish line when they get there with their thought process because it just irritates the crap out of them.
well, so this is another interesting phenomena that I've observed, and again, I don't know of any data on this, but people of the 1 to 2 standard deviation range, that 115 to 130 range, tend to flaunt their intelligence. They are more intelligent than average. They know it, but they're not quite smart enough to realize what the people in the 145 to 160 zone have, which is it is actually better for me to hide my intelligence when dealing with these people because I'm more likely to get what I want from them.
Yeah.
This way, I was in sales, right? You're not gonna a lot of times you could actually use logical argumentation well with people that think have a high IQ, very logically minded. That's fine, but most of the time you have to bring it down and study who they are and learn to speak around their level and identify emotional intelligence. So you observe people, you know, kind of behavior traits, characteristics, tells, signs. They might not know that you're doing that, but you are, and then you're actually adapting, putting yourself on their level, and then relating to them.
I would argue that the best salesperson's probably about 135 IQ, maybe 140, and is modulating their intelligence. They are quickly recognize who you are as a person, and they modulate themselves right down there with you. And then they use their intelligence to map out where your objections are going to come up, and they have the counters all ready to go. The sales example is actually a great example of how intelligence works. And the thing is that the people who are really smart, you are actually less likely. Let's say you're a 100 IQ person, the average, you are far less likely to recognize a person of 160 IQ than you are a person of 130.
The Nick just described how a highly intelligent person can use her thinking to think about what they're feeling and keep iterating that, doing the OODA loop.
Yep.
And they're thinking about emotions. They're not feeling the emotions and reacting. They're thinking. And so they're one step ahead. Oh, if I say this, they're going to go this way or that way. I have, okay, now here's the path. And then, you've mapped out what you're going to do in advance. Now, of course, experience plays a role here too. I mean, you learn, and then you're actually taking in information and filing it away during this entire process. So then the next time, you're actually a little bit better at it.
Okay. But now I want to go in reverse a little bit because everyone loves talking about smart people. Let's talk about people who aren't smart for a little bit. This is a tweet by a fellow that I really enjoy reading, Eric S. Raymond. He's big in the open source community. His IQ is, I don't remember exactly what it was. He stated it. It's somewhere between 150 and 160. The guy is brilliant. He's a Mensa genius level kind of person, just to give you an idea. So he's talking about a video. So we're actually gonna show the video first, and I'm sure you guys will notice some facts about this video. This video is being taken at a gas station. And I don't have the sound up. The sound's actually not relevant for this. It's just a bunch of people yelling and screaming and hitting each other.
They're pulling hair too.
Oh yeah, we got the hair pulling going on, and this video runs 3 minutes. Yeah, okay. And
ooh, was that a guy they were beating on, or
guy tries to go in and pull them off, and he gets beat up.
oh, okay.
So, and we're still going here, and it just keeps on going. Yeah, and then eventually, of course, it breaks up. Okay. So for those listening along, I'm going to read this. This is a long tweet. Of course, this guy his IQ is far in advance of mine, so he just writes a lot, and it tends to be wordy. He says, "It was difficult for me to watch this video all the way through to the end, but it reminded me of something important that I think a lot of people at and above IQ level 100 don't understand. It's something I only understand myself because travel is broadening." And he's talking about, like, people are moving around the world more here. This video is what life among the truly stupid is like. The incompetent, spasmodic monkey dance violence, the pre-verbal hooting, crowding out articulated speech, the squalor of people without the cognitive capacity to plan much beyond the next cheap high. No, the important thing about these people isn't that they're, okay, I have to leave that word out. It's that they're sampled from a population with an average IQ of 85. So that's one standard deviation down from 100. And the high time preference, this is something that I want to get into. This is an economics thing, but time preference ends up being a significant predictor of intelligence, or a significant marker of intelligence that predicts, and the high time preference that it predicts, and the general inability to handle counterfactual hypotheticals. Now, we don't need to look that up. Well, actually, I don't know, if you're watching and you have an IQ of 85, you won't know what that means. But
Counterfactual hypotheticals. Counter arguments, basically, in space. Abstract thought.
Oh yes, abstract thought. Yeah. That it predicts. If you picked a stupid enough cohort of white people and let them stew in each other's juices for long enough, you'd see the same crap. You would. This isn't about.
It's true.
This IQ is not about your
ethnicity.
Yeah, it's not. It's not about your ethnicity. I mean, yes, genetics plays a component in it, but it's not an ethnic genetic component. It's other things, and your postnatal environment, your prenatal environment. Like what your mom ate, what she had access to in the way of medical care. And of course, you breastfeed for about 6 months, so what your mom continues to eat after you're born, all of that matters. Okay, that's the environmental stuff that matters. People of average intelligence of Europeans or Northeast Asians anyway, did not usually understand how stupid gets. When they try to model the behavior of somebody with an IQ of 85 or below, they imagine someone like themselves, but with a smaller vocabulary and missing the ability to do specific smart people things like mental arithmetic or whatever. It isn't like that at all. And that's what he's. Go ahead.
You see, places like Japan, and there's other places, are very law-abiding.
Yep.
For instance, if you leave your wallet out, no one's going to steal it. It'll be there 15 minutes later. It's there, a day later, someone might look at it, figure out who you are, and call you. Because, I don't know, maybe it's higher intelligence. They realize, hey, society's better off if we trust each other and don't steal from each other. Because I'll be better off because that's going to happen to me. So, gee, we don't have to spend as much money guarding our stuff and all that. And, let's just be civilized and law abiding. Well, you leave that in a area that is lower intelligence people. It's probably lower income as well because they haven't developed as much. Why haven't they developed as much? Well, maybe it's a chicken and egg thing. People, don't
We're also
have
missing
the intelligence to
culture.
work through things, but the culture hasn't evolved to a enough stability where you can develop. And so it's an iterative it's a slow progression over generations where I think IQ has increased in Europe through civilization and stability. And okay, once you have that, now you're getting better nutrition and
better medical care
and everything. And the whole situation gets better.
So, Steve, what you actually described has a name in psychology. It's called the Flynn effect.
Okay.
And
what's that?
The Flynn effect, actually, right here. Raw IQ scores on IQ tests for many populations have been rising at an average rate that scales to 3 IQ points per decade since the early 20th century, a phenomenon called the Flynn effect. So that's exactly what Steve was describing. I was actually hoping one of you guys would pick up on that.
Oh, well,
so
glad we didn't disappoint.
So and there have been studies on this. Yes, they actually do study the IQs of various nations. I have not found a source that I could find that people wouldn't immediately scream, Europeist if I used it.
Yeah.
So I'm still looking for one, but there isn't a great one. So Steve, you were talking about Japan. Japan does have an average higher IQ than the global 100.
Yeah,
They do.
they're among the higher IQ people.
Yes.
Or ethnicities in the world.
Yes, they are. So I mean, it's great that you brought them up, and you can change your you can change your IQ mix by changing your culture mix. And one of the things that the Japanese have actually done a very good job of is not changing their culture mix too much. Now, that has severe demographic implications for them, as we've discussed in other prior videos. And Japan's going to have a rough time of it for this. I'm not saying it's all good,
But there's
but
also you're talking culture, like moral values, the way they're raised, but just like the natural hardware change as well.
right. And so the Japanese are still fairly monocultural. They've actually managed to hold on to their culture and their moral systems that go with it, regardless of whether or not we think those moral systems are the best.
Well, other people can live in Japan, but they just can't become citizens. There's Koreans that have been there for a couple generations. They are still not Japanese citizens.
Mm-hmm.
And an American can go over there and marry a Japanese woman. I don't think he's going to become a citizen.
Yeah,
His kids probably will be.
Yes, they are.
They're not that wacky.
Well, they
mixed race child.
They use a system called jus sanguine. It's the French for right of blood. So the United States uses jus sanguine and jus soli, which is right of soil, which is where the whole anchor baby phenomenon has arisen from, is the right of the soil. But just by being here, you're an American. If you're born here, you're an American citizenship. So yeah, the Japanese, now what that does mean is that their demographics have collapsed because they are not importing people. But the people that do go to Japan here's another interesting little tidbit. The people that move to Japan tend to be of similar IQ brackets as the Japanese. Because the Japanese, in order to get into Japan long term, you need to provide specific value to Japan. Now, that means you're probably working for a tech company. You could be an engineer at an automotive company, right? But these are all jobs that require IQs, a standard deviation above the mean. So the importance of intelligence here cannot be understated. Like if you want to get in Japan, sorry, you need an IQ of probably about 120 on average to stay there if you want to live there. Because they will be able to find the average Japanese person who is smarter than you if you don't have that. And their culture and society is still geared towards Japan for the Japanese. So they're going to give that person the job first. You need to have a special skill that they don't have. And as far as immigration goes, I think that's a fine way to set up your immigration system. They're going to have to figure out their demographic issues, and that's a whole nother problem for a different day. But anyway.
Well, okay. I heard a story. I think he was a white South African guy, talking about relations with the black people, the Zulus. And he looked at language. And in English, you can say the coconut is up the tree or halfway up the tree. No, coconut wouldn't be halfway up the tree, but let's just say the coconut is halfway up the tree. In Zulu, I think it was Zulu, they don't have a word for halfway. They just have a word for up the tree. So without a proper vocabulary to capture concepts, they can't describe concepts. And that's going to hinder them in economic development and civilization. But I mean, they don't have the capability for that. No, that's probably where the Flynn effect comes in place, where at some point they didn't need concepts like that. Now they do. So now you know they need to develop that, and that just doesn't happen in 10 years or even in a generation. That's going to happen in 2, 3 generations.
4 or 5, 100,
Okay.
120 years. Just
So yeah, okay, yeah. Whether this is pleasant or not is kind of immaterial. It's real. This is how the rest of the world is. And here in the US, we we don't even think down these lines that different cultures have different abilities for historical reasons, not necessarily for genetic reasons. And E. Michael Jones, who is a Catholic author, has talked about this. How back in the I don't know 600s, 700s, he's half German. He says my ancestors were running around in the forest chasing pigs, and then, and I believe it was the Benedictines came in and opened monasteries and actually taught the German people how to work. Well, do you think the Germans back then were as smart as the Germans today? Kind of doubt
no.
it. They didn't have the vocabulary. They didn't have that work ethic. They hadn't built upon things and probably didn't have the nutrition. And okay, that's part of just the advancement. Is this evolution? I don't think so. I think it's probably just the Flynn effect, or what happens as cultures advance or civilizations advance.
So, well, there's an interesting corollary to this, and that is, so we were talking about how Japan, they only want to import people who are a net intelligence benefit to them. Okay, you're an engineer with 130 IQ. Yeah, you have some value. You can bring us in. You can come in. What happens when we take the intelligent people from one country, one culture, and move them to another country and another culture? That country and culture that we took them from loses their smart people. Okay, it makes sense. We took them from one, moved them to the other. So we're talking about the Flynn effect here. What we're basically doing is harvesting the very top end of what they've been able to achieve with the Flynn effect and taking them out of their country.
Hey, the British Empire did that for probably a couple hundred years. They brought the smartest from their colonies there, and it greatly benefited them. The fact is now the U.S. over the past 100 years, we've actually attracted some of the smartest people from cultures all around the world. Look what that's done to our economy and stability and standard of living and all that. We have greatly benefited.
We have. The problem is those countries have not.
No, they haven't.
In fact, they've suffered for not having their smart people, because the smart people are how you build things like, I don't know, an irrigation system, a drainage system, right? Get the toxic stuff away from me in a safe manner, and that will improve the environment for the next generation of children to come up, right? But if we suck all the smart people out of a country, they never get there. So
Now, what are we doing to our own country? Dropping idiots everywhere.
well, I would argue that, I would argue that Steve's view is at least historically more accurate. Yes, we have issues with in the current modern politic, which we're going to avoid for the most part here, except, it's like do we
Maybe
need
not a good idea.
well, it's not a good idea for us. It's also not a good idea for them. We aren't helping them. You think that we're helping them by getting them out of their countries and improving their lives and teaching them things. Like, yeah, okay, bring them to our colleges, teach them things, but you've got to send them back. The problem is once they get here, they don't want to go back. So
So I had a similar thing when I was in seminary. We get all these foreign uh, international students on like a free. They guarantee some of them like a free ride or something, but then they get here and a lot of them never wanted to go back and bring that knowledge and instruction to their own people. Some did, and I know some of them that did, but a lot of them won't stay.
and I don't blame them for wanting to stay. I really don't. I get it. I'd want to stay too. Like in just a like we're not I'm not trying to condemn those people because I would be one of those people if I was in that situation. The point is thinking matters to cultures. Thinking matters to societies. And when we try to suppress thinking, we were talking earlier about Nick, about the person's, your 100 IQ person's scared of you. Your 100 IQ government functionary is scared of you. We are suppressing. We are actively now suppressing intelligence in our country, and this is something that I've been thinking about for a while now. Is when you are in control of the monopoly of force, government, and it's run by, I guarantee you, the average IQ of the average government functionary is 100. The government is the single largest employer in the country. So statistically, their IQ bell curve is going to look identical to the country's IQ bell curve because they're the biggest sample. So what that then means is that all of those government functionaries who are running around trying to tell other people what to do, they're going to look at somebody with 130 IQ and they're going to be terrified of you. And so they have access to force. So they're going to use their force to force you to be less intelligent, which is kind of what you were describing. And what I would say is that there is value in shutting up, letting them think you're dumb, and continuing on your way when you're out of their orbit.
We've seen some of this in industry as well. A lot of it, actually.
Yes.
I started in the workforce in 1986. So I'll use that as a date. In the early 80s, 70s, 60s, 50s, 40s, who was the head of big corporations? It was the founder, who was the inventor. So he's obviously a very smart guy. And then as industry progressed, it was usually an engineer who was the head of the company. And just by virtue of the job, they're pretty damn smart people.
Had to be.
And then in the late 80s, 90s, and ever since, it's been finance people. Everything is finance driven now.
Mm-hmm.
And I tell you, working for these companies, I mean, some of these companies that are no longer around must have been exhilarating. Working at Kodak or Xerox, technological companies run by techies. I mean, it was probably just an exhilarating place to be. Or even the old General Electric plants. They were huge, generally run by engineers. And the whole culture has changed now because it's finance driven. And I don't think our companies are really keeping up in general.
Well, you mentioned GE, so I brought up Jack Welch.
Okay.
You're talking about finance. This guy was famous for turning GE into a finance company. He he turned. He was the guy and this all happened in the 1980s. A lot of this did. Everyone says, "Oh, he's the greatest CEO that ever lived." Well, he produced great returns on investment. So you're talking finance there. He did that, but how he did it was by
Didn't their finance division damn near bankrupt the company eventually?
2008.
What happened with like other companies, like Sears and a few
Um,
other stores?
the company
General
that
Motors, GMAC, General Motors Acceptance Corporation. Remember that? They used to do a lot of financing stuff.
Well, the company that's been in the news a lot lately that was famous for its engineering culture, Boeing, was run by a guy named I believe Jack Calhoun. I could be right. I'll have to look up his name. He is now out, and a guy named Kelly Ortberg is in, and Ortberg ran Rockwell Collins, I believe. And he took Rockwell Collins from a small avionics provider up to like the major avionics provider for Boeing, and he did it with engineering. He engineered this cool unified architecture. They could just sit there and plug things in for different airlines, change how the airlines ran their business, and particularly on the training side, very cool. It was an engineering solution, but the folks who had been running Boeing up to actually this Kelly Ortberg thing just happened in August. They're all finance people. They're all Jack Welch acolytes. They were all taught and learned under Jack Welch. Oh, okay. So they ran consider this. Boeing moved its corporate headquarters from Seattle to Chicago. Well, if you're not connected to the trading world, you probably don't fully understand the importance of Chicago, but Chicago is where the CME is, the Chicago Mercantile Exchange. That's all your commodities, futures, options, all of that runs through Chicago. Chicago is a massive finance city. And Boeing had to be closer to Chicago for finance reasons because they were trying to turn it like Jack Welch did to GE into a finance company. And it's interesting you bring this up because, as I mentioned right at the beginning of the stream, I want to talk about something called time preference. It's a concept in economics and also trading and whatnot. So if you remember the ESR tweet, he talks about how low IQ people have high time preference. And what that means is an individual's willingness to prioritize immediate consumption over future benefits. Or stated differently, a person with high time preference prioritizes the here and now over some abstract possible future.
So they're limited. They're severely limited, and they could be outthought, outplayed.
Correct.
They're not investing for the future.
Literally.
Well,
Consume it now.
they're also trying to put a company that's a square into a circle. So,
Well, so it takes 10 years to design an airplane. It takes 10 years. You cannot run a company like Boeing with a high time preference. And the financial time preference is 1 quarter, 3 months. So it takes 40 quarters to design an airplane. 40 quarters. That's
They're
in,
trying to. They're just. Yeah. Okay. That's exactly where it's going. Yeah. I would
right.
have thought. Yeah.
So
So
this concept of time preference actually ends up being what has driven our society into the positions that it's in. We have airplanes from a company that was what very highly respected for its engineering prowess blowing out door plugs because the people involved, and I've actually read the lawsuit, they danced around the intelligence of the people working on the factory floor so hard.
There was, I just recently heard the head door plug guy was on vacation that week.
I'm shocked because what you really said is there's so few people at Boeing who understand how to actually do that procedure that if the head door plug guy goes on vacation, it gets done wrong. And this is what happens in high time preference companies. You're not selecting your employees for their engineering or technical acumen. You're selecting your employees for the time preference of the company, which in this case is push out as many airplanes as possible. And
again, they're trying to put a square through a circle.
right.
The little toy, whatever it's called. It's like,
Yeah.
oh, we can make this fit, and everything's going to be okay.
Well, and then you look at it. Oh, damn!
It worked.
We got 100 engineers that really we don't need right now because they're twiddling their thumbs.
Yes.
Gee, we could save so much money and show a profit if we just laid them off. We don't need them. Okay, right. You're going to show a 1 or 2 quarter profit because you just cut your workforce. But about 2 years later, you're going to need them. 10 years later, you have no idea how much knowledge just walked out the door. That's knowledge that doesn't get passed down to the other people.
It's the same
That
thing at some
is
of the
the real value of your company is the knowledge of the people. And all throughout my, since I started working in engineering, companies were doing that all over the place. Getting rid of, we don't, we're going to move our manufacturing overseas. And next thing you know, they're shrinking their engineering departments because, we're going to farm that out too. And then they're not innovative anymore. And eventually, they're not even competitive.
Right. And didn't Plutarch talk about this happening to a certain security failure or something was it cloud strike or something?
Oh yeah, a crowd strike. Yes.
Yeah. Didn't there something similar happen there?
A CrowdStrike was also an engineering failure, and they will not say that it happened with an outsourced or contract employee because no one wants to admit those kind of things. But we've been talking about the as Shu says here, we've been talking about the brain drain off and on through various angles on our channel for weeks now. So yes. And here's the thing, if I'm working for a company that has high time preference, the quarterly time preference from the finance world, the company is not going to value me. They're going to see me as a replaceable cog because they're going to, from a financial standpoint, they're going to look and they're going to say, okay, I can spend, I'll use $100,000. I can spend $100,000 on you, or I can go to India and get 4 people for $100,000. And those 4 people can push out 4 times more product. Well, they kind of can. And I have seen the work that some of these people push out. And I hate to say it, but y'all are going to experience more and more failures in the high-tech space. Windows has gotten less stable over the years. Hem. Everyone praises, Microsoft for, producing great financial results, but their products are not what they used to be. There's some areas of that company that are still relatively solid engineering orgs, and there are some that are not. And it's about the preferences of what those orgs are trying to achieve.
And then sometimes they get rid of people because they don't have politically correct views. They may be wicked smart and have the knowledge, but nope, that guy is not politically correct. So we're going to get rid of him because we have you got DEI hires, and what was the other one? ESG.
ESG, yeah.
Yeah. To meet their parameters and diversity and all this. And don't you know, diversity is our strength.
Well, Steve, I'd like
Can
to
I
point
send
something.
a text about this?
You might have. But I want to point something out here. That sort of hiring and firing is not possible in a low time preference organization, because the low time preference organization is going to look at it and they're going to go, okay, well, what do we need to achieve our goals 5, 10, 15, 20 years from now? How do we make sure that knowledge is properly passed through? How do we make sure we get the best engineers to design the best products for the future? But if high time preference is your only concern, and I just described how companies treat their engineers as replaceable cogs in a machine, well, if you have been treating your engineers as replaceable cogs in a machine for 20 years, you're going to start to say, hey, well, I can just go over here and use this other metric to hire engineers because I think this metric is more important now. And all engineers are the same, so I can just slide that new, more correct cog into the space where that old engineer was. And
No, don't do it.
so if you want to talk about the decline and why we're seeing these everything about society sort of falling apart and not lasting as long, or things that are built but they just they don't work right to begin with, or they fall apart, like the door plug. I'm going to keep hammering on that one because it was so fucking stupid. We either accept that we have to get back to low time preference thinking, or we continue on this path. But low time preference thinking does not look like emotional intelligence. It actually is, if you go back to the definition we read earlier, but it doesn't go back to that definition of emotional intelligence that people use. In fact, what we're going to have to do would look very emotionally unintelligent because it's going to be mean. So we've been talking about, okay, well, should we start promoting that men not get married and not have children? Well, and we will probably do a show on this in the future, and it might even be 2 shows, because it is a complex idea that involves saying, for the next 15, possibly 20 years, we are going to accept a very painful situation for the express purpose of achieving a goal, a long-term goal. This is extremely low time preference thinking. It's also looks evil in the near term, but it feels evil. It feels horrible. Like, how could you possibly say these things? How could you possibly tell men not to have kids?
But it doesn't really matter what you and I say. They're already doing it. This is just it's an organic path. We are going on this trajectory. It doesn't matter what men recommend to other men. Because you know what? Men make up their minds based on their own personal views and their personal experience. They're not all that influenced by others. I mean, somewhat, but they're going to do it regardless. Right?
Oh yeah.
Yeah. We live in what, that movie? What was that movie? Yeah.
Idiocracy?
Idiocracy? Yeah. It's just not the time. So the smart people don't have smart kids, and the idiots breed.
Well,
Yeah. That's another thing.
so there's one more thing that I want to put on here for specifically emotional intelligence, and it's this is from Wikipedia, but it's this line in here that just blew my mind when I read it. Illogicality or irrationality in terms of thinking processes are, as defined by researchers, cognitive distortions that cause abnormal functioning. The state of depression often feeds off illogical thinking and results in victims being mired in self-defeating conclusions. And I'll see if I can make that a little bigger for you guys. There we go. Think about what this think about what this is really saying. What this is really saying is that emotional intelligence, this emotional thinking that people say is the best, is the best, and it may no, the correlation between the increase there is just reading this, and this is kind of one of those ideas that just hit me while I was uh, preparing for this episode. The correlation between the rise of emotional intelligence and that concept and the rise of the use of antidepressants. As we drive people to think more irrationally, more illogically, we are driving them to depression. We are driving them to anxiety because their rational mind, their neocortex is interpreting the information coming in from the world that does not match these emotions that we feel, and it we've been telling people, but you need to be more emotionally intelligent, and they can't reconcile that, and they drive themselves into depression.
Oh, there's one other word in here. Results in victim.
Yes.
Self-defeating conclusions. Oh, does this also mean it means victim mentality? Oh, woe is me. I'm a victim of somebody did this to me. It wasn't
Sure.
me. It was somebody else's fault.
Right.
I'm a victim.
Yeah. Well, it's interesting that, you know, there's a lot of prevalent disorders where, and let's just say, no, I'll stop there. I could go to bad direction. You might not like. But just over obsessive being with this type of DEI thinking. I mean, emotional intelligence. um, there's also certain psychological disorders as well that it's they they cannot take ownership of what they have done wrong. They're always the victim.
Well, in order to take ownership, uh, it would require you set aside your emotions and acknowledge that you did something wrong and that you need to make amends for it or in some manner, and that doing so would be to the benefit of not just society but yourself.
And then short-term pain for long-term gain, which is also a time preference issue.
Correct. High time preference people tend to do anything they can to avoid pain. And I think the part of why I wanted to do this is I was looking at what we've been talking about recently, going, if we don't explain the importance of sitting down and thinking more, thinking further out, none of it matters. None of what we're talking about matters, because the time preferences are just going to grow higher and higher, and the in our desperation to avoid pain, we are just going to cause ourselves more pain. And we're not going to know why, and we're just going to turn into a bunch of feral animals lashing out whenever the pain hits us.
Like that lady we talked about on Saturday.
Yeah.
Hey, farmers have a word for this too, or an expression. Don't eat the seed corn.
Yeah.
You might you might not be hungry now, but you sure will be hungry next year. You got no seed corn left.
Yeah.
Right. You know, we have to start, and somebody has to. It can't just be us. There's got to be other guys out there who are willing to sit down and have a conversation about, okay, what short-term pain are we willing to accept, but also what short-term pain are we willing to inflict? And I think that's the harder one for a lot of us. What short-term pain are we willing to inflict on the society and the culture to achieve a better long-term result? And I've said this before, and I'll say it again. We are past the point where we can get out of this without experiencing large-scale pain. Probably the late 90s, early 2000s was the last time you could have turned this around. And so we need to start encouraging men in particular to, even if your IQ is exactly 100, that doesn't mean that you can't sit down with these ideas and say, I might not understand everything here, but I recognize that somebody is trying to help me. And I might not understand everything they're trying to do, but I can take what they say to do and do it. By the way, that's how the military works. But it takes a hierarchy, or some might say a
Some of
patriarchy.
this is kind of already happening.
Hmm.
Because censorship. Censorship is out there. Certain words you can't say. Certain groups of people cannot be talked about. Certain topics cannot be discussed. And they're wanting us to self police. Well, okay, what do people do? Well, a lot of them do self police and they're not going there. But there is a growing number of topics that are showing up and being discussed that were considered taboo 5 years ago, 10 years ago. And so I think there are certain men out there, and it's primarily men, who are saying this needs to be discussed. And even if I have some short term pain because of this, this is critical information. We need a discussion. You can think I'm wrong. That's fine. But we need the discussion. So it's starting to happen. I think
Sometimes
a
action
lot of
also
this.
needs. Well, like
Go ahead.
sometimes action can lead to discussion. Like a lot of people think, oh, when I wrote that letter to the judge and I sent it off, I was just acting impulsively. I wasn't. Was I acting? Did I have a lot of emotion involved in that? Absolutely. But I was a pastor. I was asked to violate my ordination vows. My kids were kidnapped from me. I hadn't seen them in like, at this point, like 5, 6 months. I'm being portrayed as this thing. They invaded the church. They pulled, you know, um, what's called, what's this word? Long distance hole punchers at me.
Oh yeah.
Uh, and people say, well, why did you do that? I said, well, this is exactly what I've been fighting. And now I have to force people. First, I couldn't live with myself if I did nothing. Second, it forces people. Now the church has to deal with it. And now everybody else that's that knows me and now also has to think about
Yeah, it doesn't that probably didn't make your situation any better, but
it.
it's
No, it didn't.
elevating the issue to help others and for the long term. I mean, and yes, you get peace of mind that I did the right thing.
Well, I
Well,
didn't. I didn't just go off like a cow.
yeah. So you mean that it is possible to do something that is even when you have emotions? Because let's be honest, even somebody with an IQ of 180 has emotions. But it,
Fully knowing the probable consequence and doing it anyways. Yes.
yes, sometimes that's what men have to do. We talk about World War II and all of the moral quandaries of World War II, and there were lots of moral quandaries. And sometimes, like one of the things we've said here, and we will say again, is that the Bible provides a pretty good moral guidebook. But as Nick has said before, the Bible doesn't tell you what to do or how to do it in all cases.
No.
So you take the morality of the Bible and you apply it to the situations that you're in. And that's a rational thought process. In order to map your morality onto the world, you have to think. So this idea that people who think more and are smarter are these amoral automatons. Bullshit. I call bullshit. Not true. They aren't the Sheldon Coopers and Leonard Hofstetters of the world. I'm not saying that people like Sheldon don't exist. They certainly do. But sometimes smart, intelligent men have to come together and say, this is what we need to do. This is why we need to do it. The morality of doing so is questionable, but the morality of allowing the present situation to go on is not. It's a bad morality. It's you know what I mean? Is it the allowing the present situation to continue is very definitely immoral.
You're saying there can be a time preference in morality as well.
Yes, I am. Nick, you can correct me if I'm wrong, but I don't know that I'd go. I don't know that I'd go collective. But
I don't like collective decisions.
yeah,
That's a decision made by a committee.
right. What I would say to that though is as Steve has pointed out a couple of times, men are already starting to do this of their own accord. The immorality now would be to allow them to would be to continue on their own path for their own reasons because they're not doing it with a purpose. They're doing it because they have nothing better to do. But men need purpose. And so what I would say, and the stuff that we've been talking about, we will continue to talk about, is the morality stems not from whether or not saying what we're saying is inherently good or evil. I would say that not getting married and not having kids is probably not on the good side of the column, but we need to work with men where they are. And we need to understand that the system that we're fighting against is an absolute moral, heinous, immoral, like there's no question about its evilness. And now we have to look at it and go, okay, what is more important to us? Defeating the absolute immorality that we see over here, or not convincing men to take on a smaller amount of moral quandary? I don't like that it's come to this. I hate this. But, watching Nick have to go through what he's going through, and I'm saying, okay, and other men. I mean, Nick's just the example on the screen here of men who are going through this. But the stories never end. We're talking about what, 56% of first-time marriages end in divorce. Okay. So feeding men into that wood chipper just so that they can say they got married and had kids, that's moral?
It's not, but I bet if someone did a study on who is impacted more severely, it will be the more intelligent men who have the better jobs and who are being more productive and are more essential for society because they have the higher incomes. And so we can squeeze those guys and make them pay and destroy them. And some of them end up self-deleting because they make money off of those guys. The guys who are not at that level and, scraping by, doing illegal stuff, they got no income to tap into. And so we're not going to go out. You can't squeeze blood out of a turnip, so they're not going after them. So it's a time preference issue. High time preference, get it now because, squeeze it out of these guys now. And once you squeeze it out of these guys, they lose a lot of the motivation to perform at the high level. I did.
And they do not, and they are against the system. They're not on their side anymore. That's a dangerous thing.
Yes, take a bunch of high IQ, high earning men and make them hate you. Oh yeah, this is a really good idea. Because remember, the high IQ man is thinking ahead of you. And other people, okay, in relation to intelligence, and Steve, thank you for noting this earlier. When we talk about it was Nick, and the high IQ or the average IQ of the average government officer, let's say they're 100, right? This idea that diversity is our strength. No. And let me explain why. IQ is not cumulative. If the highest IQ person in your organization is 120, then somebody with an IQ of 130 can outthink your entire organization. If the highest IQ of a person in the government is of an enforcement officer of the government is 100, then a person with an IQ of 120 is going to outthink every one of your enforcement people, all of them. This is why the military wants 120 plus for their special forces guys.
Here's the other thing I've observed, and you can tell me if there's any basis for this. You put a 120 IQ person in a group of 100 IQ people, he's probably going to perform at no better than 110 to 115 because he's not getting the stimulation and the support. Plus, he's got to blend in. Now, if you take that 120 IQ person and you put him in an organization where everybody's 130 IQ, now he's getting the right stimulation. He's learning things. He's probably going to perform at his IQ maybe even a little bit above. So that's just
saw
been
that.
my experience.
I saw that when I was working at a Fortune 500 tech company. There were people in the room smarter than me, and they made me better. Now, Steve, I would modify what you said a little bit.
Okay. I
The-
just threw it out there. It was stream of thought.
You're almost there. In my opinion, you're almost there. If you take the
I don't think
person,
it raises their IQ. Yeah, sorry,
well, no,
I interrupted. I'm sorry.
I'm actually going the other direction. If you put a person with 120 IQ in a room full of 100 or 110, I don't think it so much lowers their IQ or they perform at that lower level. I think they spend so much more of their time cleaning up the messes. And I have seen this so many times. The high IQ folks on my teams spent an enormous amount of time going back, cleaning up the messes of the lower IQ folks on the team. And these were these are nice, decent engineers. Now they tend to be very beta. So they would just very quietly come in and do it. And they would say, oh, and they would try to mentor the person, say, oh, well, you can't, okay, this is funny. I got to pull this up. Shu, you're being optimistic. I'm just saying.
Now, okay, I got a question for Shu. What's the average IQ of a TikTok watcher then?
Drop it in the comments there, Shu. We want to know what's the average IQ of a TikToker. So, yeah, I think Steve, you're right. But this idea that, but this gets back to what we were saying about society sort of 60. He says 60. So basically drooling. 60 by the way is actual 60 by the way is actual brain damage. Like so by putting people in a group of 100 IQ, but if you put one person in a group of 100 IQ, they have to camouflage themselves. They're gonna be forced to clean up the messes of the lower IQ folks. They can't do anything useful. But you know what else they can't do? They can't make trouble. They're so busy that they can't make trouble. Steve, doing what you do, driving a truck with your IQ, again, don't know what it is, but you were an engineer, so clearly you took and I do not mean to diss on truckers because you all aren't dumb, but
some of them are pretty smart. There's a lot of smart guys driving trucks.
Well, what's interesting about this is a lot of smart guys are grabbing jobs that do not require high IQs. Think about what
the job so damn easy to do.
Yes, it does.
I got so much time to listen to things, think about things. I got enough money for me, and I got extra money because I don't have a family anymore. I enjoy it. Great.
Right. But here's the problem for the system, Steve. Now you have time to think. You can apply that IQ and those decades of experience to problems that are not your work.
Oh, could that be what we're doing on this YouTube channel?
Yep. No, so like, I don't know about you, but I was driving up here. I was listening to a couple of podcasts on finance and a book on Stonewall Jackson called Rebel Yell. I mean,
you were thinking?
like listening to this. Yeah, all the time. Love it.
And you have the time to think?
Yeah.
Uh-oh, Nick, you're scary now. You're a scary man now.
This
That's why Steve
YouTube.
likes his job too, because that's when he gets to listen to when he drives. He gets to listen to stuff all day.
Yeah, but
He gets to think through
he's
stuff all day.
old.
Oh, and I'm keeping up in general with what's going on in the world and in the red pill manosphere area. Not, it's too much to keep up with,
Oh
really.
yeah. Oh,
And
yeah.
you know what? I've abandoned all the multi-hour streams. If it's if it's over 3 hours, probably not worth listening to.
Well, that I think gets down to a signal versus noise problem. Because in a super long stream, I mean, I don't know what your average trip length is in your truck, but it probably isn't 5 hours to start with because I know you're not a long haul trucker.
Today, I went from Fargo to Bismarck, 3 hours each way and back. So
Yeah.
that's long for me.
Okay. So 3 hours is long. Okay. And most of our streams, well, we got 1 hour and 45 minutes out of this. I was not expecting that. Most of our streams are an hour and a half, 2 hours. That's kind of our run length that we target. And it's a loose target. Sometimes we go longer or shorter. But the point is, can we deliver information on a topic in a reasonable amount of time and then let you guys get back to thinking? We want you to think more. Our streams aren't multi-hour marathons because we want you to think more. People who try to dominate your time are trying to dominate your thought.
Well, the other thing is our streams are basically on one topic. Yeah, it might be an in-depth exploration. Yeah, there's no reason. And I don't mind. If it's a 3-hour stream and it takes me 2 days to watch it and it's all on topic, I can do that. That's not a problem. That's worthwhile because there's a topic there. It's not just prattling about this and that and the other thing and this person over here. And, there's so much just prattling in there. It's not even pertinent.
Well, Michael, I don't disagree with you that thinking gets us in trouble. That's actually the point. We're supposed to self-censor. Yeah, I can see Nick, you're laughing there. You better stop thinking. It has gotten you in trouble.
What's my moniker?
Ecclesiastical troublemaker. Right. Now, I see the winky face. I got you, Michael. We're good. I get what you're saying. But it is important to people who are less intelligent to get you in trouble for thinking. They need you to not think. Because it's the only way they can keep you operating at a level that they can interact with. If you want to talk about the system and whatnot. The system wants everyone to censor themselves down to the level of a 100 IQ. And one of the best ways to do that is to flood the zone with noise. And flood the zone with things that force you to, or well, not force you, but trick you into emoting and emotionalism.
That's like, what do they call that? And if you don't validate their emotionalism, what's fallacy is that?
I don't know what you're referring to. I'm drawing a blank.
Special pleading.
Oh, special pleading.
Oh,
yes.
Special pleading.
Yeah.
You're talking about your text message.
Yeah.
Okay. Yes.
Yeah.
Okay. Yes. It's a special pleading, but it's like a group special pleading or something weird like that. It's also a little bit of moving the goalposts, but the men who think are the most dangerous people in the world. If you want to be more like, I opened with an example of with Steve, Nick, we were talking about bringing a knife to a fight, and then somebody else brings a long range hole puncher to a fight. Who's the smartest person in that group? Or actually, let me rephrase that. Who's the most likely to survive? Statistically, the hole puncher person.
Mhm.
The hole puncher person is likely not the strongest physically, not the physically strongest person. I'm not saying physical strength is bad, but the thing that has set humans apart since before the dawn of history, even if you if you believe in that kind of stuff, is human tool use. And tool use is a function of intelligence, not strength. So the genes that are most likely to live on to the next generation are the genes of intelligence. It's part of what drives the Flynn effect. Because the low IQ brute is much less likely to survive. They will do something dumb to get themselves killed. And it could be, they stand, like in Grug days, right? They would stand under rock and rock would fall and kill Grug, right? You know,
Fall, kill Grug.
right. It doesn't have to be, it doesn't even have to be intentional. It could just be not paying attention to your environment. And so the people who survive paid attention to their environment. Well, in order to pay attention to your environment, you have to be capable of abstract reasoning. That rock is there. That rock may be on head if not careful. So what we're trying to get at here is do not make enemies out of intelligent people, because intelligence is the most powerful form of leverage that humanity has. That's why in the description I said it's humans superpower.
Hey, I got 2 questions for you guys.
All right.
Because we're getting into something red pill here.
Oh, do we?
Oh, yeah. Uh-huh. So a young woman who has a choice between the stud, Miss Chad, who's just good looking and got the muscles and all that, or the average guy with intelligence and, hardworking and, all that. When she chooses Chad, is she exhibiting high time preference?
Yes, sir.
Oh, maybe the other guy might have been the better choice.
Yes.
Okay. Now, okay, go ahead.
Well,
Got
I
another
would
question.
say the reason why is because a man of intelligence does not reach his full economic potential till much later in life, because that intelligence needs experience to go with it. Okay.
Oh,
It took me
okay.
10 years, 10 years to get good at my job, good enough to where I can feel comfortable going out in front of other people and speaking to them and saying, here's how you do this. Right.
Okay. So the young woman in college who is smarter than average and she's going to marry one of these intelligent guys. You could pick one in college who doesn't have the experience and the track record, or she can pass on him and hope to, they call it waiting at the finish line
Yeah.
and go find a guy who's already successful. But you know what? There's a lot of other women waiting. So, okay, again, high time preference is I can't wait for him to be successful. I need to go over here to the successful man.
Yep.
So this intelligence thing does have application in the red pill world, more of an observational thing, I guess.
Okay, I'll add
And
to
how
another.
many women are gonna act on intelligence versus their feels?
I'll add another one to that, Nick. I'll have one for both of you. So, men tend to have higher IQ variability.
True.
Women tend to cluster around the average or the mean, to use the stats term. So, women tend to cluster around 100. So, it's not to say that there
I
aren't.
actually don't know that stat, but I'm assuming you're correct.
Well, so yes, there are women with 180 IQ. I mean,
I know men can generally have higher than well, they have higher capability of more men have higher IQ than women. Let's put it that way.
There's also
There's
more
fewer men. There's fewer women with 140 IQ than there are men, because
There's also a lot of men with lower
their
IQ.
bell curve is
correct.
correct. Yeah.
There's a
Right.
lot more men with 75 IQ than there are women.
Right.
Okay. So that curve works both ways. And from a biological standpoint, and sorry, feminists, but you're just going to have to deal with this one. Men do not select, Shu, you've got, it's other way. Wider bell curve for men, narrower for women. Men do not select women primarily for intelligence. And there's even some people in our space who are going to bristle at that. This is not to say that we don't consider the intelligence of a woman, but once she reaches a baseline of intelligence, we don't need any more from her. She needs to be able to take care of the kids, take care of the house, and operate in our society at a basic level. So she has to be able to drive, got to take care of the kids, right? Get groceries, do all that. But that's what we.
In general, that's true. But I select for a more intelligent woman that I can carry on a good conversation with, maybe a little bit of a debate. And Plutarch, you do the same.
Yes, but when you look at the actual like stats on what men select for,
it's not your highest priority.
Yeah, it's not.
Okay.
And one thing I have noticed is that men get older, they're more likely to select for that.
Okay.
Sure. But there's another reason for that could well be in biology. Young men are selecting for women to breed with, and so you're looking primarily at physical selectors of.
Yeah, I'm not looking for a breeder.
Right,
okay.
Exactly.
I might as well have, she's got to be, above average in attractiveness.
Certainly has to be healthy.
And healthy. And have a bit of a brain. She doesn't have to be successful.
Yeah.
But yeah, and she doesn't have to be fertile, because I'm not going there.
Right. So the idea being that a woman of average intelligence is going to meet what a guy, even so, if a guy with 120 IQ marries and has children with a girl with 100 IQ, but she's hot, he is getting literally everything he wants. She's smart enough to act in this world, to take care of kids, a house, get groceries, do all this stuff. And she's good looking. Boom, perfect guy. Perfect girl for that guy. That guy is happy as a clam at high tide.
Hey, but guys, if you do that, you need male friends.
Yes.
Carry on higher level conversations.
Right.
Do not depend on your wife for stimulating your mind and having those type of conversations.
Right.
Nick is laughing for some reason here.
It could be this. This is my wife in the comments here. When they're no longer breeders. Well, Elena, he kind of actually just told you.
Money.
Money. Yeah. So women always select for lifestyle. It doesn't matter what age, they always select for lifestyle. So,
Well, if we potentially pissed off enough people with this stream,
I
We do
hope
every
so.
night.
It's fun. It's fun to
Or we-
watch to watch them struggle.
okay, so I'll tell you what's up for Wednesday.
All right.
We're going to do a stream. Men want RSVP. I mentioned that a few times for those of you who've tuned in for a while. It means men want three things: respect, sexual variety, and peace. So we're going to do a whole stream on that. And we're going to have another participant. Shaw has agreed to come on our stream. Now, you may or may not know him. He was on Pearl's stream when Nick and I were on there. So he's a younger guy, former child support officer. He's got his own YouTube stream, and Christian guy. He's a good thinker. He's got a lot of good stuff out there, and I'm really looking forward to bringing him on here and having some good dialogue with him.
Oh wow. Very cool. All right. Well, any final words, fellows? All right. Well, if you enjoyed what you heard tonight, please share it with your friends. Yes, likes and subscribes, they help the algorithm and they help generally sharing it, but we try to make our content for men, for people who actually want to listen. So sharing is probably the best way. If you know somebody who is interested in this kind of stuff, please do that. If you have questions, disagreements, we love disagreements. You can leave us a comment. I do want to say that lately we've been getting some comments that YouTube has been preventing us from seeing. In fact, we've got another one on our last video that I'm trying to figure out how to get access to. So if we don't respond to your comment, it's not us. We don't have a lot of commenters, so we see them all and we do try to respond. So and yeah, join us on Wednesday, same time, same channel, and we'll see you all then. Later.
Bye.